This is an outstanding organization, and I knew your founder when, going back into the 80s, let me just say it like that, when both of us were trying to find our way, and God has blessed both of us to be a blessing to our community and to make an impact. And so I want to recognize, I still call him Senator Casey still, because in my mind, he's still senator, and to all of his staff, to Tangi and Owen, and all of those, Wanda, those who have reached out to me and helped me together. Good to see you again, Cesar. Y'all had the right guy up here talking about public policy, because I saw this brother when he was running around Washington, D.C., and he was doing his thing out there, so it's good to see you again. Of course, Reverend Clay, always a pleasure to see you. I have an interesting story to share. It won't capture every aspect of my work, which spans now over 30 years. But it will give you a snapshot of what can happen when you are serious about the business of serving your community, public policy, volunteerism. I've been asked to present my story in such a way so that these particular points can be brought out and to open your minds up to the challenges as well as the various successes that you will have along the way. I was very pleased to see how you all were interacting just a few minutes ago, because that's the reality of what really happened to make my work happen. To go from 0 to $7 million in 7 years is not an endeavor that is disconnected from public policy. Public policy is the seed that makes all of that occur. So I'm so grateful that you have an organization like the Stand Foundation to bring out some things in you. First of all, to understand how the public policy process works, because so many of us are ignorant to that. We have some strong passions about what needs to be changed in our community. But if you don't know the protocols and the processes, you're really walking on a treadmill. No matter how exuberant you are in your argument, how articulate you are in making your points, if you do not understand public policy, you are doomed for failure and exhaustion. So I'm very pleased to know that there is a group in Arkansas that is focusing on some of the things that are very near and dear to my heart, and that I get a chance to see that this legacy of community development will continue, because there are people like yourselves who are endeavoring to learn about the process. So, I've got the pointer here. Let's see if I can make this happen. I've already had one slip up. I'm going to apologize up front. I'm 59 years old. Less than 6 months, I'll be 60. Things happen. I don't even apologize too strenuously, because y'all gonna get there too one day. No, y'all appreciate what I'm saying. But I walked right out the door, left my business cards, and left my brochures that I had really worked hard yesterday to make sure I had for the presentation. But I'm learning that I got to get with the program, because technology overcomes all problems. So I'll give you my Facebook page and my website, and you can get everything you need about Andre Stevens and St. Francis County Community Development and our project, the St. Francis Assisted Living. Okay, my early life. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. Sprawling metropolis, a lot of activity, and I came up at a time, I'm a child of the 60s. And so I got a chance to see the civil rights movement in full swing. And I lived in Woodlawn, which was the seedbed for black activism and social justice in Chicago. My Chicago was this, though. I grew up in the projects. I lived in the 13th floor in the Robert Taylor Homes, which is on the south side of Chicago. I came from a broken home. And most of you understand, since you've been learning about public policy generally, these are the kinds of dynamics that don't lead to a very successful future. But I had 3 supportive women that set a foundation for me and my 3 brothers. It was my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. And I'm sure you all are aware of this, but the vitality of women, the importance of women, the necessity of having strong women in our community is critical. And our connection to women and why we should never denigrate, devalue, or demean women in our community, because those are the foundation of many of our families that will help us move forward. But they raised 4 boys in a gang-infested neighborhood. I grew up in the neighborhood where the gang was initially called the Black Stone Rangers, then they changed their name to the Black Peace Stone Nation. Later they changed their name to the El Rugans, and they were led by a gentleman by the name of Jeff Fort, who was spending a life sentence in Leavenworth Penitentiary because he was cutting an arms deal with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya back in the 90s for rocket launchers and different things like that. So that goes to show you the extent of his ability to embrace and capture power, so much so that he was, as a street gang leader, was able to negotiate with Muammar Gaddafi for weapons to shoot down planes. But anyway, it led to his imprisonment for life. But that was the neighborhood I grew up in. We were, at a very young age, we were targeted to be recruited into this gang. And because of the work of my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother, we were able to escape the clutches of the gangs in Chicago. My aunt, she was widowed, and she received insurance payment. And her lawyer, some of you may know, was Eugene Pincham of Chicago, later to become Judge Eugene Pincham, an illustrious practitioner of law in Chicago. He was encouraging her to use her resources and go into the stock market. And she said, no, I would rather invest in those 4 boys. And she bought a house on the south side of Chicago in a nicer neighborhood called South Shore. And we were able to escape the projects and move into a nice home on the south side of Chicago. Okay? I'm going somewhere with this, y'all. This is good. The bridge out of poverty. The bridge out of poverty. Yeah. Somebody has to create a bridge for everybody else to get out. I was fortunate because my aunt chose people over stocks and bonds. Her return on an investment was our ability to be placed in an environment which would nurture us and give us the opportunity to do some lifting in this cold, harsh world, versus a balance sheet and a return on equity that comes from the investment on Wall Street. So we had a bridge out of poverty. For those of you who are affordable housing practitioners, those of you who believe in trying to create jobs in areas where people are shunned, you're creating these bridges for people to get out of poverty. So from that arrival in South Shore, where I spent several years, my mom, she married by the time I was in 10th grade, and we were fortunate enough to move now from the south side of Chicago to the suburbs. So it was a whole nother world that opened up to me. Moving to the suburbs, where when you went to school, kids were driving up in Audis and Porsches and Mercedes and BMWs. You know, that was just a world. We were on the bus, y'all. I mean, she didn't marry like that, you know. I wish we did, but no, we was on the bus. And we were, at that time, they were busing minority students from lower income areas into the suburban schools. We were part of the group that would be bused in. Although we lived in the suburb, we were in a section of the suburbs that were designated for minorities. And anyway, back then that was the law, and we moved to the suburbs. But the point I'm trying to make is that moving to the suburbs opened up my mind to other realities about America. That there's definitely 2 different Americas. There's the America that I've been living in, which is poverty and lack, limited resources, poor educational tools, and access to different things like that, paid with the same tax dollars. But then when I go to suburbs, I see kids that got smoking porches attached to their schools. They have special parking lots for their nice convertible cars. Their shop classes had every modern piece of equipment that you would need to be successful as a skilled worker. They had relationships between the steel mills and automobile manufacturing plants where kids from the suburban schools were interning in the summer in steel mills, automobile manufacturing plants, electronic plants, and they weren't doing that at the Chicago public schools, but it was happening out here, paid for with the same tax dollars. Now, I didn't know public policy back then, y'all. But y'all are learning public policy, so you're learning how this thing works. And I'm going back to my point. If you don't know this public policy, your tax dollars can be going somewhere else when they can be going to improve education for your children. But somebody else is spending your tax dollars because you don't know how to fight it. The next big move. The next big move was to college, moving into wealth management, and then becoming a banker. I actually got my first gig working in the suburban neighborhood, and I was the first black banker in that community because someone had fought for laws that would open up banking and other occupations to minorities. So back in the in the 70s, throughout the whole decade of the 70s, a lot of occupations that had typically not been opened up for minorities were opening up. So finance, insurance, technology, there was a plethora of occupations that just flew wide open, primarily in the services industry. Now, labor jobs, we would get those all day long because we had unions that were fighting for us. But in other sectors of the economy, we weren't so prevalent. So I happened to become the first banker in this suburban bank, and the first gig that they gave me is repossessing cars. That was my first gig. With a suit and tie, repossessing cars. It wasn't like the lady on TV that goes out and does the repos now down in Florida. It wasn't quite like that. I had a suit and tie. I had a more sophisticated repo job. But at the end of the day, we were still putting the hook on you. But they said you can't make a loan unless you know how to collect a loan. That was the way they thought back then. They put me out there, and it was sad to me because I'm calling up my mother's friends and people who were notable entertainers and trying to collect and things like that. But anyway, those things opened me up for the next steps. I moved from a small suburban bank into a larger bank in downtown Chicago called Northern Trust, and I started working in the international banking department. I worked in the Latin American division. I had absolutely no idea what international banking was. I don't want to get too preachy on you, but y'all got Reverend Clay in here, so y'all know y'all gonna get some words. You probably already got some words anyway.
Bishop Brown.
Oh, Bishop Brown, well then we can come. Yeah, more, okay. But the Lord orders your steps. And you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. So from repossessing cars, which was a lousy gig, to be working in international banking in the Latin American division, handling what's called letters of credits and different things, foreign currency, all this different kind of stuff that a boy from the south side of Chicago in the projects, he ain't supposed to be in that kind of situation. But I learned so much, and I found out that people in other places didn't think of me the way people here in this country thought about me. They were more open-minded because they were global in the way they looked at things. And little did I know that two or three decades later, that we'd be in a global society. I didn't know that back then in the 80s, but here we are in a global society. But the point I'm trying to make is that it was another level of exposure, okay? So I had gone places, I had seen things. You know, I was blessed to touch and feel different realities that weren't prevalent in the projects. But the key thing that stuck with me is I never forgot home.
Yeah.
I never forgot home. I never forgot that there were folks that didn't have the opportunities that I had. A lot of my friends were still wrestling with the issues of the day, which were primarily just how to survive, how to make it through that next thing. I never forgot that. And then over time, I learned about community development and community organizing and community service. Some of this I learned in Chicago because, again, I was a youth at the time, but I was around the civil rights movement. I would remember sitting in classes like this as a young man, probably in the 4th and the 5th grade, and they were teaching us about African history, and they were teaching us about how to organize and how to fight. And I remember, I don't know how biblical this would be, but we were taught if they were taking advantage of you, walk on the bus and don't pay. You know, you're getting poor service, so don't pay. You know, so there were certain things that we were taught how to fight, to stand up for the injustices in our community. And all of this came from my youthful experiences, and I was able to parlay or organize that in such a way that it matched up with my business knowledge, my street knowledge, and my organizational knowledge. And I had the opportunity to come to Arkansas. So I came to Arkansas in 1986, and I had to be frank with you. I didn't come here to do community organizing, community development, none of that stuff. Any of y'all seen the movie called The Wolf of Wall Street? That's what I came to Arkansas to do. I was a wolf. I was coming here to work in the bond business, which at that time was pretty hot in Little Rock, and I was planning to use my experience and my knowledge and my expertise to enrich myself. I didn't have any notions at that time about trying to do anything for anybody. But in 1987, on October the 19th, Friday, October 1987, the market had a terrible crash, and our company went under. Several people committed suicide, people's houses lost, marriages broken up. And I'll never forget, I was at the owner's house lamenting the suicide of his son, and the maid, her name was Gerda, and she came to me while I was drinking a Jack Daniels and a Coke. That was back then, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And she told me to step in the bathroom. And Gerda, who was the maid, she said, "You don't belong here."
Wow.
Wow.
She just called me out. She didn't know it like that. She called me out and called me and said, "You don't belong here." She said, "You wasn't sent here for this." And she gave me her testimony. She told me how she was a prostitute, alcoholic, and her guy cleaned her up, and now she's doing domestic work. But that she knew that I wasn't here and that I didn't need to be around that family. Obviously, she knew things that I didn't know. That was a turning point for me.
Yeah.
At that point, that's when I began to make some changes to be more relatable to my community, not so self-centered, and I started going to church. And I started moving in the direction of building up my spiritual life. And as I built my spiritual life up, I'll never forget, in August of 1988, I had a dream at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This is how impactful these things are. I can still remember precise times. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw a cotton field, I saw a pulpit, and I saw economic development. I didn't know what it had meant, but I wrote it down. And about a year later, 3 years later, I got a phone call. Somebody from the Urban League had forwarded my resume to Arkansas Land and Farm Development Corporation. If any of you know about that, it's in Fargo, Arkansas. It's run by a gentleman by the name of Calvin King. And he was on a mission to save black farmers who were losing their land unjustly, because, of course, you know about that. The land was being taken from them. with many different schemes and devices. And he asked if I would come out and use my financial skills to help farmers stay on the farm. So I came here to the Delta, which I didn't know anything about. And the first time that I saw cotton, other than my Fruit of the Loom underwear, I got out the car and I went and I grabbed it and I touched it because I was fascinated. I had heard all the stories, but I'd never seen cotton before. And I went into the Floyd Brown Agricultural Museum, which is on the campus of Arkansas Land and Farm Development. And when I walked in that museum, by the way, Floyd Brown was a disciple of Booker T. Washington. And he started that school based on the model of Tuskegee. And there was a placard on the wall, and it said, "Drop your bucket where you are." And it connected. Wow. It connected that I needed to be here. Now that was in 1991. I met Cecil in 1992 when the Clinton administration was making moves to become empowered in the country and the presidency. And that's when doors began to fling open for me. I was able to help many farmers retain their farms. Some of them couldn't, but we gave them a soft landing, using all of these experiences that I've had back in Chicago. In addition to that, I started learning about rural development. So all my life, I've only known about urban. But I started understanding rural and rural people. And I would go down to Gullah Gullah Island down in South Carolina. We'd go all through the Black Belt. And I was working with community-based organizations, helping them to raise money, put together grants, organize, advocate, inform the Clinton administration of what the needs were in rural communities. So I would stand before congressional representatives doing just what you all did today, articulating what it is like in rural, poor America. There are two different rules. Rural ain't just rural. There are a lot of breakdowns when you say rural. So you gotta be real clear what kind of rural you're talking about. You're not talking about corporate farming rural. There's a Wilson family rural, and then there's Andre Stevens rural. They're different. So you have to break that down for people, and that's what you all want to do today, how to articulate what the issues are as it relates to your people and your community. And we had a lot of success. But that whole dynamic, I did that for 4 years as a consultant. I did it on my own at that point. And I was working with groups like Southern Rural Development Initiative, the National Congress for Community Economic Development, the Commission on Race and Social Equity. So I began to learn a lot of different things about what was going on in these different communities. Now, from that, in 1998, God redirected me again. He said, "Come on off that trail. You've learned enough. Now go home." So I came back to Forrest City, Arkansas in 1998, and I started the St. Francis County Community Development Corporation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit represented by low-income people who are my governing body. And we were successful in getting we were successful in raising in our very first year $400,000 from the Foundation for the Mid-South, which we in turn used that to raise $2.3 million to do welfare to work programs, workforce development programs. We created 13 different programs. This was bottom up. This wasn't top down. This was bottom up, from the people. So from my governing body, from people in the community, we created a program called Auto Buy. If you were on TANF or welfare, whatever you want to call it, if you were on that program and you were trying to go to work, we would arrange for you to purchase a car. Your note would only be $50 a month. If you didn't have a driver's license, we paid for that. We paid for you to have 1 year's worth of insurance. And if you had any breakdowns in a year, we paid for that too. Because that's a bridge. That's a bridge. And it was with taxpayers' money.
Yes.
All right? And we were successful in doing that because there was public policy in place that allowed us to do that. We had good public policy in place at the national level because that was the Clinton administration which orchestrated it on the national level. They devolved, they reset, if you will, the resources that typically had come from the federal level. They sent them to the states and they said, state people, you figure it out. That was a Clinton thing. Yeah. We had I'm trying to use the right word, but we had a good thinking, a right thinking governor. Let me just say it like that. Y'all figure it out from there. We had a right-thinking governor that forward-thinking. Thank you. We had a forward-thinking governor that understood that if you really were going to make impact and change the community, you can't call those shots from Little Rock. You got to let the people call and form the programs and design the programs and create the frameworks locally. So at that time, every county had one of these. Now, some counties went the typical way. They just moved it to a state agency and let the state agency decide. We thought, as a people from Forrest City, St. Francis County, we thought that we were going to do this through a nonprofit that we formed and we governed. And for 3 years, we were successful in not only doing the Auto-Buy program, we created a program which gave us national recognition called PREP, People Realizing Employment Possibilities. That came and sitting on my couch one day. That was one of those God divine answers to a problem. But people realizing employment possibilities means that we pay the employer to hire you. Wow. Now y'all have it now because it's workforce doing it. We preceded workforce. We were before workforce. We were ahead of workforce. And we paid employers in our community to hire people who were trying to transition from welfare to work. We would pay them for a year. We would give them a GED, whatever to pay for their child care, pay for their transportation. If they didn't have a car, didn't want a car, we would pay for a transportation voucher so somebody can pick them up. We had our own transportation program that we used these resources. So we created jobs. So we had taxi drivers, we created jobs for them. These are our folk, not state folk, our folk. After you were successfully employed for a year, we worked toward getting you a home, not rent, own. And even now, we still run housing programs where if you are low income, you can still own a home. I just did a deal not long ago for someone who was 83 years old, whose income was only $12,000 a year, and they are now a homeowner on Social Security alone. And these programs are out there, but if we're not digging in the weeds, they're in the weeds, y'all. There ain't nobody got no billboard out on I-40 or I-30 talking about come get this affordable house. No, it ain't like that. You have to take the time to dig in the weeds. You have to know who your elected officials are, who have the resources and the staff that can go into the weeds and find a lot of these programs that will solve a lot of these problems that we're having. And so just as a sidebar, and I don't want to get too political up in here, but as a sidebar, if I cross that line, y'all pull me back. But as a sidebar, a lot of people were complaining about the previous administration, President Obama, that he wasn't doing nothing for a lot of these low-income communities, and that's not true. The problem was that the people didn't do the work to go find these resources because they were there. And it's incumbent upon people like me to come out and speak the gospel of social activism and social uplift, which is part of the gospel, yes, so that we can free ourselves up, because no one's going to do it for you. So anyway, before I get off point, that was a major move that we made. We had youth programs, so there was no excuse. If you had teenage children, you didn't have to stay home and watch your teenage children. We had youth programs. We were taking young men and going into the roughest parts of our community, paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for dilapidated houses. We would take those young men in there. We would have them ripping off shingles, tearing down sheetrock, which they love that kind of stuff. And we were rebuilding those homes, and then we were making affordable, safe and affordable housing for people in our community. We were doing our community. We were fixing our community. And these young men were not only getting hands-on training, but they were understanding things like partnership and how to work together and how to lead and how to follow. they were doing something other than things that would get them in trouble. We were creating spaces for them to do that. So in 2004, in the middle of July, on a hot summer afternoon, I'm up on the roof at 702 Choctaw, Reverend Clay.
Yes, sir.
And I was tearing the shingles with these young men off the roof of a home. And so people came in from New York, and they was looking for someone who they could invest in to build an affordable assisted living. Now, I have to be honest with you, I had no idea what that was. I wasn't even that was not something that I did. I didn't know anything about that. But they brought me down off the roof, and what they were looking for was somebody who was committed, not just through word, but in deed, and someone who kind of understood the landscape and kind of knew how to raise money and do things like that. So after we talked for about a month or so, they decided to give me $75,000 in grant funds to go get educated. So they gave me $75,000 to go and get educated. So I'm gonna make another point here. You have to educate yourself. You have to educate yourself. You're more than what you know you are. Each one of us can be stretched beyond our wildest imaginations. But if we don't have anybody that's gonna push us, invest in us, and encourage us along the way, we won't go there. But all of us are so much bigger than what we know. And so this was another opportunity. I had been stretched, but I was getting ready to get stretched again, for someone to take me and let me, at my choosing, go and visit assisted livings and nonprofits and other people around the country who can educate me about what this was that I was endeavoring to get off into. And after that, I began to understand the language. And that's what you all were doing today. You were learning the language, the political language. And so I began to learn the language of Medicaid, Medicare, senior ailments that afflict the seniors. What are the issues of senior citizens? You know, what kinds of things are messed up in our community that we can redirect resources to? How do we provide safe, affordable housing for many of our elders? And some of you already know elders in our rural communities are living in horrible situations. In single wides that were built in the 60s with no AC and box fences. Y'all know you know that. There's this, you know, where there ain't even no running water. They got a little creek running behind the house, and the raw sewage from the house is running into that. That's for real. That's still happening. And so, you know, after going around and seeing this, I began to build a strong passion for the elders. And I went on my journey of raising $7 million in 7 years. So from that $75,000, the next conversation I had was back with the Foundation for the Mid-South, who I had already demonstrated to them that I could take their money and build on that and make something happen, because they gave me $400,000, right? And I turned that into $2.3 million, right? And we created 13 programs to help people and to lift people. And we got recognition, they got recognition. I mean, if that's what you're in it for, there's a way to satisfy somebody want to give you some money, they want some recognition. You do what you say you're going to do, and they'll get the recognition. And it's fine with me, because I'm trying to meet an objective. I don't necessarily need no recognition. But they were able to orchestrate a meeting for me. It was a unique meeting. Reverend Clay had never had it happen to me in my life. They set me up to meet the grandsons of the Walton family. Wow. They were coming in on a plane. They told me, don't tell nobody. They ain't gonna come in with no security. Ain't gonna be nothing like that, no press. They coming in, they gonna have faded glory jeans on, sandals, Old Navy t-shirt, and a flop hat. They came in a purple Dodge Dakota truck, stayed at the Hampton Inn. They came out looking like they was just coming out of a frat house somewhere on the University of Arkansas campus. And we rode around all day long in my van, and we talked. Now, each one of them at that time was worth $17 billion. So I knew money wasn't no issue. But I also had enough common sense to know, don't be talking about money. Let them see what you do. There's a right time to make an ask, and there's a time to keep your mouth shut and let them feel it. Because if they ain't feeling it, you're wasting your time on the ask. So you gotta set up the situation where they can feel it. So we went to Hughes. Man, I went to every tough area that I could think of. And they wanted to walk in a crack house.
Jesus.
They wanted to go to the crack house. I said, well, what kind you want? You want low-level crack house? We ain't stuck in no one level. We can take you to whatever level you want to go to. And so we had a good time. We laughed, we just talked, and they just regular folk. And they just needed to see that I was regular folk. And at the end of the day, we shook hands, and I still didn't ask. But several months later, they sent a check for $500,000. And that $500,000 opened up a ton of doors for me. And it wasn't so much that it was $500,000, it was the fact that they gave me $500,000 out of their family trust. That wasn't the company, that was the family. And so when people found out about that, I started getting free legal services. Because I needed big law firms. I had the Friday Elder Law Firm begin to represent me on my business deals. My architecture gave me pro bono services up to $250,000 until I could pay it, which at some point I did pay it back. And a lot of people that I needed to make my deal work and to go to the next level came to the table. So here's another point I'm trying to make. The connections that you make mean something. They mean so much. And they can open up a huge amount of doors for you, as theirs did. It opened up a wide door for me. And so we took $500,000. Let's see if we got this. Okay. And we were able to raise $400,000 from USDA, $2 million from Arkansas Development Finance Authority, $400,000 from the Community Development Block Grant, another, well, that's the $500,000, and then $100,000 from the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation. 6, 9, we get 7 million. Get that? Did I get that okay? That's how we got there. Now, I'm making it look so simple. I don't want to do that, because then I'd be lying to you. I had fights all along the way. The first time that I teed it up, even with all of the support from the Waltons and everybody else at that point, you're going to have opposition. Whatever you're endeavoring to do in your career as a servant leader, community activist, you're going to have opposition. The key is how do you figure out how to navigate that. I had the nursing home owner come out against it, filed a statement with the state saying that it wasn't necessary to provide affordable, safe, clean housing for seniors. That's what I was endeavoring to do. And if you saw his facility, it's laughable because his place is deplorable. It reeks of urine. It's overheated. It's one of those one flew over the cuckoo nest situations. If you ever saw that movie, it's like that. And we're providing something that people can esteem and be proud of, and that you would want grandma and big pawpaw in for his family. But he fought against that. I had political battles. I had haters. I mean, you're going to have haters. Just don't get with it. and just know it's going to happen. Just be ready for it. Gird yourself out. And then you have to fight your own inner demons. Because I'm going into an area, I mean, come on, I went from 400,000 to 7 million. You know, those are things you have to wrestle down. Because you don't want to go to jail. You don't want to mess up. I'm trying to talk real to y'all. Y'all talking about getting out in the community. I'm trying to talk real. You don't want to go to jail. So you want to make sure you're dotting every I and crossing every T. And it takes time to do that. And if you don't have the right level of resources, I would suggest don't do some of this stuff. Because you'll go out on a limb and you'll try to make something happen, and your heart is right, but you don't have the wherewithal to make it happen, and you'll make a mistake. And some of these mistakes are costly. They'll cost you. They'll cost you. So anyway, you do have to fight your own fears, your own apprehensions. Can I do it? I've never done this before. Can I do this? You know, everybody's coming against me. Maybe God's trying to give me a sign. You know, how many conversations have I had like that? You know, oh, God don't want me to do this no more. Kind of like the old preacher out there chopping cotton. It got real hot on him one day, and he heard from the Lord out there chopping it. Bro, he said, oh, I believe the Lord will call me to preach full time. But when the boulders start rolling on you, those are not necessarily signs to quit. They're opportunities to strengthen you. And little did I know that all of those oppositions that I was going through were getting me ready for 3 failed attempts. The first time I got approved, but the deal fell apart because one party said they couldn't do it anymore. So you gotta have all of these players sticking together. And if one gets off, you ain't got a deal. The second time it came around, same thing happened. And each time I gotta go back and reapply and do all of this stuff again, it's costing me $200,000, $250,000. The second time was the Great Recession. Everybody went away. Because the economy, everything changed. Everybody went away. And by the grace of God, President Obama came in, and he had this program called, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was to bail everybody out. But anyway, he put a massive amount of federal dollars out there. Recovery funds. Stimulus funds. Thank you. Stimulus funds. Yeah, boy, he rolled that out. And the deal was this. You had to have a shovel-ready project. Man, I had a shovel-ready project, had dirt already on it. And I had all my paperwork, everything that I needed, I acquired over the first 2 failed attempts. So blueprints, plans, insurance companies, all of that stuff, all of that was lined up. And I made my presentation, and we were able to put ourselves in position for those stimulus funds. And each one of these agencies, they had stimulus funds, they had stimulus. That was a record. No one had ever gotten that amount of money out of Arkansas Government Finance. We broke the record. CDBG, stimulus funds, that's private sector. That's private sector. These were all because of public policy. Public policy. We were able to get through it. So, is this helping y'all?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I want more than that. Okay. So partnerships, we talked about that. Shared visions. Every experience is an opportunity to learn and to grow. Even the adverse ones. They're an opportunity to learn and to grow. And you have to take those, you have to really, some of those are even your better experiences when you look back. They ain't too comfortable when you go through them, but they're good when you look back. Do you have a dream? Do you have a dream? What is your dream? What is your dream? 7 odysseys of disappointment. Well, I talked about that. Lost my house. Marriage of 37 years was strained to the max. All of my employees except for one. I went from 13 employees to 1. People who said they were with you, word got out that you was a failure, they didn't want to be around you no more. Just all the things that can happen that you already probably know about. But then we got the end result, which was the St. Francis Assisted Living. $7 million. The assisted living is a place where if you're not ready for the nursing home, but you need health care services, you can come and live there. And you have all your meals prepared for you. You have all your medical services. You can get your feet lotioned up if you have diabetes. Men like that. We have nice nurses. You can have a 1-bedroom, a studio. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. And it's a job, we created 40 jobs, full-time jobs. We are a hospital we're a clinic, a restaurant, and a hotel all in one. And you can stay there until you go on to glory. You never have to go to a nursing home. And we're half the cost of skilled nursing. It's a win-win situation. We're winning for the taxpayers. And if you ever come to Forrest City, Arkansas, please come and visit us. Or go to Facebook or go to our website and see the facility. But this is what we do, y'all. It's diverse. We ain't helping no one segment of the community, we're helping the whole community. We've got opportunities where there's intergenerational programs going on where we're bringing in young people to learn how to interact with our elders, because it's something that we have forgotten. We're real rapidly falling off the cliffs with how we're treating our elders, and they're a real key aspect of our community. So we're trying to rebuild that. This gentleman, Marty, he comes in every single day. He plays the piano with one hand, and he plays all of the old hymns, Blessed Assurance, all the real old hymns, old ones. You don't hardly, ain't no piano player, no Kirk Franklin.
Foundational.
Right. Yeah, he plays those and every day I can see, every day I'm looking forward to him, because he gives me an oasis of peace every day. When my day's going wrong and he's in there with that one hand playing those hymns, and it's such a joy for the elders. And so we're changing the dynamic in the relationship of how we don't even call them seniors and old folk, they're elders. That's a whole different connotation. We have a program we're getting ready to kick off called Respect Your Elders. We're gonna go viral with that, because we want to turn this thing around. Because people are living longer. We have 5 people in there that are over 90, and they're lucid. They can communicate well. They're just not as fast as they used to be. They may have to take some meds and stuff like that. But I'm saying the reality about how long people are living, it's changing. So we've got to make sure that we're creating spaces for our elders, so that while you're at work, you don't have to worry about Big Mama and Papa and falling, and then someone's there to make sure that they're taking their diabetes medicine, their dementia medicine, high blood pressure medicine. They're getting their blood pressure checked every day. They're getting their sugar checked every day. So we're supporting health, wellness, longevity, quality of life. We're getting them out. We even have husband and wives living in there, because the husband may have a serious case of dementia, and if you ever been observe a situation like that, it strains the other partner. So she gets to bring him and live there with him, and she can go shopping, and she can go play bridge and have tea and all that kind of stuff with her friend. Now they go to First Baptist, they go to other First Baptist. Okay, not the First Baptist you from. All right. They have tea at that First Baptist. All right. Yeah, they play bridge and have tea. But my point is that she is so happy, because no one else would allow her that privilege. And as you scour the state, and particularly in the Delta, there is no affordable. We're the only one. We're the only one. Okay? So there's no one around. So if you're on Medicaid, you can't go to St. Bernard's. You can't go to whatever the private ones are here that cost $7,000 a month. Because we stayed in the game, kept the faith, and fought the good fight, we were able to deliver for everybody. Jobs, health, quality of life. Our community is so proud of this community. When people come to visit, they come in and they can't believe it. We've had people come in and say, I can't live here. I just can't believe I can live in a place like this. That they don't believe it. And it's going back again to public policy. Arkansas has what's called a Medicaid waiver that most people don't even know about. It's been on the books for over 20 years. That allows you to use Medicaid to pay for this service. We're one of the few states in the country that has a Medicaid waiver that allows that. None of our neighbors have that, and if they do have it, it's so stingy, you can't afford to provide these services to people. It's just too stingy. So Arkansas has that on the books, and it's been on the books. So they've had one of these up in Fayetteville, but they ain't never had one in the Delta, and where the highest concentration of people who need this are in the Delta. So what we're trying to do is to not only demonstrate that this is doable, we're in our 5th year of operation. So they say in the business world, they say if you can go 5, you can stay alive.
Right.
If you make it to 5, you're gonna stay alive. But we at 5, thank God we alive. So this is what we do. That was the journey, and this is what I wanted to present to you today. And I pray that this has somehow illuminated you, fascinated you, encouraged you to do what you dream to do in your own locales. And with that, I'm going to open up the floor for any questions.
Where's your facility located at?
Thank you for asking, Reverend Clay. Certain things God bless you with just by way of. It's at 1800 Stevens Drive.